A reading from the 9th chapter of the Holy Gospel according to Mark. Jesus said to his disciples, left from there, and began a journey through Galilee. But he did not wish anyone to know about it. He was teaching his disciples and telling them, the Son of Man is to be handed over to men, and they will kill him. And 3 days after his death, the Son of Man will rise. But they did not understand the saying, and they were afraid to question him. They came to Capernaum, and once inside the house, he began to ask them, "What were you arguing about on the way?" But they remained silent. They had been discussing among themselves on the way who was the greatest among them. Then he sat down, called the 12, and said to them, "If anyone wishes to be first, he shall be the last of all and the servant of all." Taking a child, he placed it in their midst, and putting his arms around the child, he said to them, "Whoever receives one child such as this in my name receives me. And whoever receives me receives not me, but the one who sent me." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Many of you will remember a great fighter 30 years ago. He was identified with, "I am the greatest. I am the greatest." Well, it's happening again. We have candidates of both parties saying the same thing, trying to convince you and I am the greatest. For we humans, I agree. It's going to be a long candidacy. We humans all crave power, status. We all want the most likes on the Facebook, to be the top dog. So we can't blame the disciples today as they were following Jesus. They started arguing. And Jesus knew they were arguing and asked them what they were arguing about. They were too embarrassed to tell them, but Jesus knew. Their conversation behind Jesus as they were following probably went like this. Peter would say, "Jesus told me that I am the rock." And then John would say, "Jesus called me the beloved disciple." And Andrew would say, "Don't forget, I am the first apostle and have been with Jesus the longest." In fairness to the apostles, they were entrenched in a hierarchy of that culture. Power was tied up in gender, class, and age. Women had little, if any, status. Slaves were at the very bottom, followed only by the most socially inferior group of all, children. Children were to be invisible. Children were to be unnoticed. They had no opinions worth listening to. They counted for nothing. And yet, after he found out what they were arguing about, he took a little child in his arms. He used the child as a prop. I've never thought of trying that up here. This child, he said, is to be a standard of who is the greatest among us. It's a very interesting fact about the Aramaic language. The word for child is the very same word for servant. the very same word. Jesus used that play on words, changing and challenging the very structure of society and ours, but especially the apostles. The greatest among you is the one who is like this child, a servant. That's where true power and authority is. Service to the most vulnerable. Service to the most invisible. Service to the weak. And of all people, Jesus is the epitome of the suffering servant. And Jesus is not even running for office. Jesus just identifies with the powerless, the invisible one in the room. Each of us needs to recognize, although you know it intellectually, that we can't take status with us. We can't take any wealth with us. We can't take any titles with us. That all is left behind. What can we take with us is how have we served the powerless, the invisible among us, the unnoticed among us, the weak among us. We tend to call them the poor. I'm going to close with a very simple story. It happens every time, this ritual, when one of the blue bloods, the Habsburgs, die in Austria, and I'm an Austrian. When the Habsburgs die, even though that particular dynasty is no more, there's still a tradition that they get buried in the imperial crypt. So what happens is the family brings the body of the Habsburg to St. Stephen's Cathedral in Vienna after a high requiem mass. The family takes the body to the imperial crypt. They come to a big door. On the other side of the door is a priest. He's watching the door. So the family knocks 3 times with this ritual. And the priest says on the other side, "Who wishes entry?" And the family responds, one of the great Habsburg members of the family, baron of somewhere, of the line of the glorious Catholic emperors. And the priest will respond, "We do not know who you are." So the family knocks again. And the priest responds again, "Who wishes entry?" And now the family adds some more titles. The great dynasty. He is one of the blue bloods. He is the hope of our nation, and on and on. And the priest responds, "We do not know you." And the ritual is 3 more knocks. "Who wishes entry?" And the family says, "A poor and sinful man." And the door is opened, and the body is placed in the imperial crypt. The reading today is all about who is the greatest among you? It's the one who recognizes the need for humility, like the root that goes down deep so that the plant can ultimately create great foliage that can be seen. And that foliage is all about service. For to be the first is the first to be the last.